questions.
I appreciate that. So
Sure, just let me know if you have more questions.
No, I will. I'll give Councilor Medina another couple of minutes here. Yeah. Sorry for the delay.
I just got an email from Councilmember Medina. He's having trouble logging in. We'll send him the link again and see if that helps.
Okay, great.
So, Cindy and Councilmember Marcano, this is Julian. Actually, I had an issue with my login, so I'm using Mac's computer.
Oh, okay.
And can I just try to share see if the share works? We're waiting.
Made you a presenter.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
So you can see the share screen, right?
Yep, sure can.
Okay, perfect. I can stop. See if I can stop somewhere. Lost. Where is my? I can't go back. Okay, let's see. Oh, it's there. Stop sharing. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. And there's Councilor Medina. All right. We've got a quorum. Okay, so it is 1:06. I'll go ahead and call us to order. Thank you everybody for joining us this windy afternoon. I'm glad to see that we haven't all blown away. My name is Juan Marcano, and I have the honor and pleasure of representing Ward 4 and chairing TAPS. I'd like to introduce my fellow committee members. Councilmember Lawson, who's our vice chair, will not be joining us today, but Councilmember Medina.
Yep, thank you for having me in this, and I'm representing Ward 3, so thank you.
Wonderful. So let's move on to our first item here, the approval of the February 23, 2023, say that 2 times fast, meeting minutes. So I had no changes. Councilor Medina, did you?
Yep, good.
All right, good deal. So those will be approved. Just please send those over and I'll get them signed and turned around to y'all. We have nothing listed under consent, so we'll move into general business. Our first item is for A, the Aurora Multimodal Transportation Master Plan Intergovernmental Agreement with CDOT. And I believe, Huilang, you have the floor for this one.
All right, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Chair Marcano, as a member of the committee. So this is the IGA between the city and the CDOT on the city's multimodal transportation master plan. And we were very pleased that this project was funded by the Dr. Clark's TIP Call 2 programming process with a total project budget of $3.224 million, $1.6 million state funding, close to $100 million federal funding, and 44,000 city match. The IGA and the resolution for approval of the IGAs are included in your packet. So we'd like to go through the council approval process in the spring timeframe. Then we'd like to have we're in the process of posting the request for proposal, and we'd like to have a consultant on board, have the consultant contract approved by the council in the spring, summer timeframe. Then we will be able to issue the notice to proceed and have a kickoff meeting in the late summer or no later than early fall. So the entire project is going to take about 2.5 years. We should be able to wrap up the entire project by the end of 2025. So here are some of the highlights and the focus of the project. Again, this is the purpose of the project is to develop a citywide multimodal transportation master plan with city vision and goals identified, which will be consistent and supportive of our places or our comprehensive plan. And the project is going to be forward-based and innovative in values, with some special focuses on the current trends and the paradigm shifts, such as complete streets concept of designing streets for all users of all ability and income level, and also to recognize the important values and benefits of walkable and bikeable neighborhoods and active transportation system (TOD), which will bring to positive property values, placemaking, all those things. And also there are a lot of other paradigm shifts, such as remote working, different commuter patterns, freight, drone delivery, e-commerce, transportation network company, Ubers, Lyfts, micro-mobility, shared mobility, e-bikes, e-scooters, and some of the emerging transportation technologies, such as autonomous and connected vehicles, and also the most recent state legislation on greenhouse gas reduction requirement on transportation. So there are a lot of important factors and trends we need to consider through this process. So the project is going to be the plan needs to be adaptable and responsive, and it will be an integrated multimodal system which will serve as a unified mechanism to guide transportation projects and programs for all modes. And public engagement, stakeholder engagement will be a very important component. We're going to have a very extensive, comprehensive public engagement process throughout the project. And so this will be a citywide efforts aligned to one single plan, including policies, program elements, near-term, mid-term, long-term goals, implementation strategies, and some of the maintenance responsibilities, as well as concepts and programs. We're going to also have a system performance matrix and a monitoring system, which will help us to evaluate, maybe at least on an annual basis, to see the progress and we made against the goals and objectives identified through by the plan. So with that, so I'd be glad to answer any questions from the committee. And so a question for the committee is, do you support to move the IGA forward to the next available City Council study session for approval consideration? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Councilmember Medina, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I had written Ellie too. I don't have anything in my backup, so I can't access any files. So I'd just like to, they can send out me the information so I can kind of look at it a little bit more and make some ideas at that point. But I'm fine to move it forward.
Thank you.
And I did want to just point, Ellie, could we paste that link into chat again so that Councilmember Medina can grab the PDF off the city's website? Just FYI, Councilmember Medina, I guess we had some issues due to pending transitions in staff getting the documents loaded to eScribe. So we had to just pull them off the city's website. So I understand it's not convenient, but all right. So first, I guess I want to say that I'm really, really excited about this master plan. Just looking at some of the backup here, some of the images with like what's possible. around the Gaylord, for example, and how we can transform some of our other arterials. I love this kind of forward-thinking approach to this, and how we can utilize what we gather from creating this master plan. So I guess here, let me scroll through. Sorry, since I'm also kind of struggling, since I'm working with the PDF here. I wasn't able to make any bookmarks. With this, with the timeline here, I guess, are we going to be able to have more frequent updates once this gets going? Because I really feel like what this is trying to, at least the kind of like the vision that's laid out here, really should be a focus for this committee. And I'm just wondering if it would be possible to get kind of like a monthly update as to where we're at on this. And then once we
Certainly.
actually have it moving forward, what some of the findings and recommendations are.
Yes, thank you, Chair Marcano. Certainly, we plan to make frequent updates to the Transportation Committee, the TAPS, as well as PED and the entire council. So whenever we reach the milestone, or maybe even on a monthly basis, each TAPS committee, we can brief the committee on the progress and updates.
Okay, great. And I guess, how do you see this interfacing with the land use reforms that I think are pretty likely to pass at the state level, in conjunction with some of the own work, the work that our own staff has been doing around our Unified Development Ordinance?
Great question. This is a transportation study, but land use has always have an important impact on transportation. You just can't plan in transportation without considering land use. So there will be an element, a land use element, urban design, urban form that will be play into the entire framework to make the transportation function better. So there will be a component on that as well.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, I'm very excited about this, and I also support this moving forward to the full council. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry, I had to scroll up to the top here. So our next item is going to be 4B. Consideration to approve a resolution for an intergovernmental agreement with CDOT for sidewalk multimodal access improvements. Woohoo. And who's going to be our staff source for this one?
I think I'm supposed to be. Can you hear me?
Yep, sure can.
To Steve.
Hey, Steve, you've got the floor.
Let me see if I can share my screen here. I always struggle with WebEx, so apologize here.
It's all good.
Let's see here. Yes. Okay, can you see that?
Sure can.
Okay, awesome. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Gardner with the Transportation Project Delivery Group in Public Works. And I'm going to take about, hopefully, 5 minutes to tell you a little bit about the Multimodal Access Improvements Project. It is grant funded. So we will be executing an IGA with CDOT for the project. This project, we applied for funding in the 2022 to 2025 TIP cycle. The needs for sidewalks, primarily in the Adams and Arapahoe County portions of Aurora, are pretty extensive. In this particular case, the needs were spelled out by the Havana Corridor Study, which was finished up last year, as well as the Bike PED Master Plan, which is about 10 years old. We felt like it was a good candidate for federal funding because it encourages multimodal travel and provides safer, more adequate paved pedestrian access so we can get to and from bus stops, to and from our places of work and where we live. So the grant award itself, our application was one of 12 submitted in the Adams County region, subregion, and one of 11 submitted in the Arapahoe County subregion. Of the 59 projects submitted statewide, all were awarded funding, including ours, yay. As submitted, the grant application asked for 80% of $6,640,000 for the project. As it was awarded, Dr. Cog, they basically divided up the federal funding into 2 buckets, one of which has a 20% match and one of which has a 10% match. So in the IGA, I believe it's Exhibit C, if you are able to look at that, what you're going to see is the Dr. Cog funding of $5,312,000 with a match, City of Aurora match of $864,000 and a grand total of, I think it's $6,176,000. But in reality, all they're showing there is the minimum matches. They just do that as a standard practice. The city also has an overmatch of $464,000. So the grand total is what we've budgeted and what we've expected, and it gets the project budget up to $6,640,000. So it's a little bit confusing. I don't know why they do it that way, but they do. So the project locations in the Adams County portion of Aurora are north and south of 17th Avenue on Havana Street. We have existing sidewalk there, but it's inadequate. It's like 2.5 feet wide. You can't pass another person coming at you. So we are going to widen those sidewalks to reach the existing bus stops. We're going to do the same thing south of Montview Boulevard on Havana. And then Colfax Avenue, which is south and east of the Havana Street location. On the north side of Colfax, just west of Laredo Street, we are going to put in brand new sidewalk to connect up to some existing sidewalk west of here, which will then give us a continuous sidewalk corridor between Laredo Street and Jasper Street on the west, and provide better access to the existing bus stop there on the north side of Colfax. So now moving further south, just south of Colfax Avenue, but going back to Havana Street, we are widening the sidewalk, the existing sidewalk, north and south of 13th Avenue to get to existing bus stops. And then south of East 4th Way, on the east side of Havana, we are putting in a brand new sidewalk to connect up to some existing sidewalk and complete a sidewalk corridor there. Again, to give us better overall continuity of our sidewalk system. Further south in the Arapahoe County portion of Aurora, we've got a brand new sidewalk that we're going to put in on the south side of Yale between Peoria and Xanadu. This will enhance continuity of the sidewalk system and provide better access to and from bus stops, existing bus stops along that side of Yale. Further south and east on the west side of Chambers Road between East Hampton Circle and Nassau Avenue, we're putting in brand new sidewalk. It's right along the Timbers subdivision, condo and townhome subdivision. And that's going to do a lot to enhance mobility and provide a contiguous sidewalk basically from Hamden to all the way to Quincy. So those are the sidewalk locations. The scope of the project is pretty straightforward. We have money to do the final design for all these designated locations. As part of the design, we're going to do some public outreach to not only the neighbors, but the traveling public and other stakeholders, make sure everybody's informed of the project. And then finally, we will bid and construct all of the locations. Our timeline is we were awarded the grant last fall. we're going through the process of doing the IGA now. We're going to get a design consultant on board here in the next few months. We'll do design and public outreach starting this fall, we anticipate. That'll take us about a year, but about 3/4 of the way through the design, we'll be able to start acquiring right-of-way and easements. And then we'll construct the project starting in summer of 2025. We brought this before the committee to see if you support moving it forward to the next available study session. Are there any questions for me that I can answer?
All right. Thank you for the presentation, Steve. So I'll defer first to Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, just want to make sure clear on the Havana corridor there on that where you said 4th Street. That's that piece that's currently has a bunch of, I think, electrical boxes and things like that, correct? Which will be up to, I think, for both sides there from the north and the south pieces to connect those.
It
Right.
is.
I'm glad about
I have
that.
a picture here
That's
that
an
I
area
can
of
show you.
contention.
I think the top right corner, if you can still see my screen, that's what you're referring to. Yeah, there's some switch cabinets there.
Right.
There's all kinds of, it's utility spaghetti there, but yes, we're aware that that's going to be a challenge.
Yep, I figured as much, but I appreciate that they're looking at that and getting that done because I know that area specifically has been a real contentious for a lot of community members. So I'm glad to see that going through. So thank you. I'm going to push it forward.
Good deal. Councilmember Bergen, I know that you have joined us for an upcoming item, but if you have any questions or comments about this, I'm happy to have you participate.
No, I think it's a good project. I guess my only thing is why summer of 2025 and not sooner?
That was my question.
I know. Well, so I kind of glossed over some of the steps that we have to go through. There's a lot of steps, I'll just call it red tape. I'm sorry, I'm old school. That's what I called it years ago. But there are a lot of steps that we have to go through when we design a project like this with federal funding. We have to get utility clearance. Councilmember Medina brought that up. We have to get environmental clearance. We have to get right-of-way clearance all through CDOT. There are a lot of people that touch this or will have a say in this project. There's state oversight on behalf of the federal government, and that's fine, but it takes a long time. And believe me, it's just as frustrating for those of us at the staff level that are trying to push these through as it is for you. So I apologize, but it's one of the trade-offs, I'll call it, of going after federal funding. It just takes longer.
All right. I appreciate that, Steve. And so, that was part of what I wanted to ask about, because I actually just yesterday I had read about this tunnel that they built over in the Faroe Islands. I know kind of apples and oranges for sure, but they built almost a 7-mile underwater tunnel in 4 years, complete with a roundabout, by the way, because it connects 3 islands. And I saw the timeline for this, and I was like, why is this going to take nearly 3 years to do for a sidewalk, right? So I would like to see if we could get an overview of that process that you have to deal with, you just alluded to. I understand that when we involve federal funds, it definitely drags things out. But I'd just like to, to have the committee get a better idea of what all is involved in getting, a project from conceptualization to completion, because I want to see if there's, some of that red tape that we can actually cut in this process. Because I'm very excited about these sidewalks, especially the one on Yale. That's one that I've my gosh, it was actually right after our first council meeting back in 2019. I had a constituent who was in person ask me about, why are there no sidewalks there? So this is something that, I was hoping that we'd be able to get done a lot sooner. But yeah, I just want to be able to explain to folks why it takes so long, and then see if there's opportunity for council to maybe update some of those processes to make them a little less painful. So
Yeah, we can
that's
do
part of
that,
the
certainly. I'll
Cindy.
work with Cindy and
Yeah.
we can put something together for you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And if
believe
you-
me, I wish it were an easier process, but it takes the time that it takes because so many people have to touch it.
If you can help us fix that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and if anyone's curious about the project that I was just talking about, check that out. I just dropped the link in the chat. All right. Well, thank you so much for the presentation, Steve. I'm good with this moving forward. And Councilmember Medina, I believe you were as well.
Correct.
All right. Wonderful. Okay. So let's see here. Scrolling back up on my PDF. Up next, we have 4C, 13th Avenue Multimodal Corridor Study Final Report. Who is our president? Tom Worker Braddock, I believe. You've got the floor.
Yes, let me figure out how to share screens here. There we go. Take it, all of you are seeing the shared screen?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Marcano. I'm Tom Worker Braddock, Senior Transportation Planner here at the city. I'm presenting the 13th Avenue Multimodal Corridor Study Final Report. The link to the report was shared with you in the council commentary. The purpose of the study is to identify ways to make it more comfortable, safer, and convenient for people to walk or bike along 13th Avenue. Really travel along 13th Avenue. I'll be discussing the study's background, providing a very brief corridor overview, sharing our public involvement strategy and what we heard from the public, and the preferred alternative going forward. And again, all of this information is presented in the final report. In 2018, the city participated in a Complete Streets Consortium with other local cities and national experts and used 13th Avenue as a case study where participants brainstormed how to make the street more comfortable for people who bicycle or walk. We used the materials from that workshop to submit and receive a Dr. Cog tip grant application or tip grant for the study. The total study was $500,000, which included a $110,000 local match. The map on the screen shows the study area. It goes generally from 12th and Yosemite on the west to the Highline Canal past Chambers on the east. This alignment connects the Highline Canal Trail, the Tollgate Creek Trail, the Wesley Creek Trail. On the east, the 12th Avenue alignment allows us to connect directly into Denver's planned bicycle network. There are 11 schools within a quarter mile of 13th Avenue, and directly on 13th Avenue itself, there's 3 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and a high school. It parallels Colfax Avenue, and we see this as a primary route for people that need to get to destinations on Colfax Avenue, but may not want to walk or bike on Colfax. Here's 13th Avenue today. It's generally described as a two-way, 2-lane roadway. There's on-street parking on both sides. The posted speed limit is 25 to 30 miles per hour. And there are bike lanes east of Sable on the eastern side of the corridor, but no designated bike facilities elsewhere on the corridor. From the picture on the left, you can see why people might be tempted to speed. When there's not much parking in the corridor, it presents a wide, flat perspective. And that picture was taken directly next to St. Therese Pre-K through 8 school, and that's Kenton Elementary School that you see to the left of the picture. Narrow sidewalks less than 4 feet wide and with rolled curbs predominate on 13th Avenue. So if there's more than one person walking, that means others in the group have to either walk in the parking lane or around parked cars in the travel lane, in the vehicular travel lane. Top map here shows both the speed limits along 13th Avenue and the 85th percentile speed. And that's the speed that 85% of drivers travel along or below. And it's generally seen as a measure of how people actually travel. For 13th Avenue, this tells us that people are driving nearly 10 miles per hour over the speed limit. This indicates that for those people, it's comfortable and feels normal to drive faster than the speed limit. The flip side of this is that for those speeding cars, it makes anyone walking or using a bike on the corridor feel less comfortable. Bottom map is the parking utilization on the corridor. We not only looked along 13th Avenue, but also one block north and south, and we examined parking use at 3 periods. Weekday midday between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., weekday early morning between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., and weekend late evening. In all time periods, less than half of the parking was used along 13th Avenue. When talking about this with the public, several mentioned that folks have had cars hit on 13th Avenue and they were afraid to park there because of speed. Now I want to share what we've heard from the public throughout this project. We had 3 rounds of reaching out to the public, and they were a mix of virtual meetings, interactive maps where people could make comments over several weeks, and in-person events. In the first round, most respondents said speeding vehicles, narrow sidewalks, and no safe space to ride a bike were why they felt unsafe traveling on 13th Avenue. When asked what would improve traveling, people responded with better crosswalks, wider sidewalks, separation between the road and sidewalks, and bike lanes separated from traffic. Most respondents said their preferred vision for 13th Avenue in the next 5 to 10 years was where cars still travel a corridor, but it feels like bicycling, walking, and transit are on equal footing with car travel. At the second round of public involvement, we presented alternatives to the current corridor. We first asked the public, though, what their top priorities were in the corridor. The top ranked priority was safe routes to school, followed by traffic calming and pedestrian comfort and safety. Maintaining all existing parking or keeping 13th Avenue as it is now ranked least important. We asked people what features they liked best of the 4 alternatives that were presented. Top responses were widened sidewalks and separated bike lanes. When we asked what features people liked least, they chose bikes sharing the travel lanes with cars and keeping parking on both sides of the street. And in the third round of both in-person meetings and online engagement, we presented a preferred concept and gave people a chance to provide inputs on large row plots with the concept laid out. As part of the second round of public engagement, we held a family-friendly streets event in October 2021. It's where we went out to a 2-block section of 13th Avenue right next to Kenton Elementary and St. Teresa Elementary. And we created wider sidewalks, bike lanes, separated bike lanes, and the shared use path using temporary materials, and invited the public to tell us what they thought about each segment. We held this on a Tuesday and had everything in place by the time parents arrived to pick up their kids from school. We incentivized their participation. If people filled out a survey, they would get a pumpkin, this being just a few weeks before Halloween. And if they filled out a survey at each of the different survey stations, they would get a ticket for an entree from a food truck that was on site. People liked wider sidewalks, preferred separate bike lanes over regular bike lanes, and liked the shared use path. To make sure people knew about the event, we hand-delivered flyers to all of the households, not only on the entirety of the 13th Avenue itself, but on all of the cross streets 1 block north and south of 13th Avenue. We worked with Aurora PD to place 2 variable message signs for 2 weeks along the corridor, and then gave a golden ticket, good for a food truck meal, to all the property owners immediately surrounding the event. Physical banner advertising the event was also put up along the corridor, and the event was announced in the Aurora Water newsletter. This is the preferred alternative that came out of 2 rounds of public engagement, discussion among staff, and an analysis of technical feasibility, and that we presented to the public in the 3rd round. It's a 10-foot side path on the south side of 13th Avenue and a 6-foot sidewalk on the north side. On-street parking will remain on one side of 13th Avenue. And of course, it's a long corridor, so these dimensions will vary along the corridor in a context-sensitive way once final design is complete. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and we've identified where it would need to vary to take into account things like available right-of-way, adjacent land uses, and need. And we did this in a context-sensitive manner. Segment you see is between Yosemite and Boston, and it would have 6-foot sidewalks on either side and shared lane shadow markings. As we move further east towards Havana, the corridor features steep grades and mature trees, so the landscape buffer next to the shared use path would be reduced. East of Peoria would have a slightly narrower 8-foot side path that's directly next to the street. Parking would be maintained on both sides of the street at schools. And east of Sable, the corridor has more right-of-way available, so we'd be able to do a 12-foot shared use path with landscape buffer while still maintaining parking on both sides of the street. So I'm available for any questions the committee might have, but the question for the committee would be, does the committee support moving the 13th Avenue multimodal corridor study final report with a recommendation to approve to the next available council study session?
All right. Thank you, Tom, for that presentation. Councilmember Medina, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions or comments, but again, I certainly like the improvements of the sidewalks and bike lanes, so more people can get out in a variety of transportation modes. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bergen, do you have any questions or comments?
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Marcano. Just so you're not eliminating any parking. You're just shrinking the road.
We did a parking utilization study during the project, and that identified that less than half of the available parking was being used at any one time. So to make improvements that was identified in the presentation just now, we would remove parking from one half of the street, from half the street. Although in discussion with Aurora Public Schools, who were stakeholders in this throughout this process, they indicated their desire to maintain parking on both sides of the street at schools. So we will be maintaining parking on both sides of the street at schools.
Okay, so there is parking, most of the corridor will have parking on one side.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and then to add further clarification, we also made sure to look at the parking utilization on those cross streets, both north and south of the corridor, so that if, parking was extensively used on one segment of the corridor, we would have an understanding of if there was capacity elsewhere for that parking move, and that wasn't identified.
Great. And yeah, I still, I don't love the sharrows, but I understand why we're continue to utilize those. But I am very, very excited about these changes. And I do want to give you all props for the outreach method that you used for this. So,
Thank you.
yeah, I thought this was very, very well done. I think it's going to be a wonderful amenity for the community. So, all right, I'm happy to move this forward. Councilmember Medina.
Yes, move it.
Fantastic. So it will move forward. Thank you again, Tom.
Thank you.
All right, and then finally, we have item 4D, the Chase Drain Pilot Program Overview. And we have Haley on deck for this one.
Hi there, can everyone hear me?
You sure can.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to share in the theme here that I haven't done anything on WebEx before in terms of sharing. So bear with me.
It's a little ornery. It's all good.
See what happens.
And all right, we can see you, but it's kind of small.
Is it small?
Is it just me, y'all? Okay, there we go. That's a little better, I think.
All right. Okay. Is it all right, or do you want me to try something else?
Hang on a second. I think this is probably a me problem. You're good. You're good.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, so I'm Haley Johansson. I'm the city engineer in Public Works, and this presentation is informational, and it's to provide background on the 2019-2020 Chase Drain Pilot Program. So prior to 2019, we heard from residents in Ward 6 about some concerns related to drainage across sidewalks near their home, resulting in icing concerns and sometimes some algae concerns. And in response to those concerns, Public Works staff met with numerous residents to observe the issues. and then evaluate chase drain as a mitigation option for those areas. The result of the pilot program is that it demonstrated some ability to mitigate ice and algae in those kind of trouble spots that the residents had called about. And in conjunction with proper maintenance by homeowners, keeping those chase drains clear, that the icing and algae concerns had been mitigated. So this slide is more of like a read off the slide type of situation, providing a lot of background detail information for that pilot program. So there were, in 2019, 2020, there were about 120 residents on the list. 13 locations were selected and chase drains were installed during a pilot program with city contracted services. In 2019, 2020, those chase drains cost about $5,000 a piece, at around $65,000. The before and after results, the chase drains installed were generally effective at reducing the drainage across the sidewalk and reducing some of the icing on the sidewalk as well. And a total program cost at that time for the remaining 107 residents would have been about $600,000. Once the pilot program was complete, council at that time did not approve additional funding for the remaining locations. Since the pilot program, Public Works, we've done some other measures, some other actions. Public Works, in collaboration with Aurora Water, developed mitigation measures that were outlined in a memorandum to residents. And I'll go through some of those mitigation measures in the next few slides. And additionally, in 2022, a resolution was passed, sponsored by Councilmember Bergen, in support of requiring chase drains being retroactively installed at locations where there are drainage issues within 1 year from the sale of the new home. So that's a forward-thinking mitigation measure. And then in the memorandum to residents, we had outlined a number of mitigation measures. One effective measure would be installing water-wise landscaping. The rock and mulch area that is in the curbside landscaping area provides an area for the drainage from the sidewalk to discharge to. Grass and sod in those areas, especially when it's installed too high, can cause some damming on the back of the walk that traps that water within the sidewalk. And in most cases, the tree lawn is sloped toward the gutter of the street, which is where we want the water to go. And criteria requires a minimum of 2% slope in those landscaped areas. These are a couple examples with the previous picture and this picture, an example of some of that water-wise landscaping. And then on the left side of the screen is a typical plan sheet for installing that landscaping. Additionally, the UDO had some updates, I believe it was in 2019, to allow for water-wise surface material in those curbside landscaping areas. This slide shows some more information on the water-wise landscape rebate. This is available to residents. And the best way to get information about it is to talk to the water conservation team in Aurora Water, or access it through the website that we have on here. So this is available to our residents if they want to remove healthy turf and replace with water-wise landscaping. And then other options and mitigation solutions that we have been able to offer is advising residents to adjust their sump pump outfall. if you can see in the picture on the right-hand side there, there's 2 homes, and then there's a swale in the middle. So both of the sides of the slope from the house go down into this swale area, which discharges the water towards the sidewalk and then towards the gutter. And so adjusting the sump pump outfalls to a different area, or maybe the swale on the other side of the home, could help reducing the amount of water to a particular area and distribute it to another area, and have less of an issue. Regular snow shoveling is always helpful, especially for areas with in the shade with a freeze thaw type of situation. It's really helpful to get that snow off of the sidewalk, and then even off of the grass, especially in those kind of lower spots, so that the water when it does melt, has a place to go to get to the gutter. Applying ice melt is an option. And then additionally, a sidewalk chase drain can be installed by homeowners, and city staff can help with that evaluation. The chase drains are required to meet city standards, and they need to be installed by a licensed and bonded contractor, which is permitted through the city. And then in 2023, we made some updates to the roadway manual. One of those updates is a smaller version of the chase drain compared to what was in the manual in 2016. And it's for residential applications and is a more cost-effective solution for chase drains in residential areas. Additionally, through the support of the resolution, the 2023 roadway manual was updated to reduce the threshold for when chase drains are required to be installed in new developments. And then if 2 or more sump pumps are discharging to a swale, then we require a chase drain to be installed at that time too. And then our next steps is staff is exploring the creation of a pilot chase drain reimbursement program to be sponsored by Councilmember Bergen. And with that, I'd like to know if you have any questions that we can answer on this topic.
Great. Thank you, Haley, for the presentation. Councilmember Medina, do you have any questions or comments?
Not at this time, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you. Pretty good summary of what happened. I have been dealing with this since 2019. I think to back up, I actually had heard from a number of residents and on social media, and I held I helped get a meeting together for the neighborhood, and it included public works staff and water staff. And I think we had around 45, 50 people at that particular meeting. And then that led to more discussions and the pilot program. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the 12-inch. That was, and I'll have to say thank you to Terry von Klossenberg, one of the engineers that has been working on this for years and years with me, brainstorming all the time about what we could do to improve things. So we did look at changing the chase drain specifications to the 6-inch instead of the 12-inch. And I think he, in talking to some contractors, found that reduced the cost about $1,500. So that's helpful, obviously, to residents. And then, of course, the warranty that helps with new development moving forward. We're still getting complaints on the chase drains, and particularly, I know people are supposed to shovel their sidewalks, but a lot of the complaints were they couldn't even shovel them because the ice was so thick. Because of that, what was the curbside landscaping, I call it the tree lawn, would over time the tree lawn actually starts to rise, with dirt and so forth, and then it dams up as was mentioned. So that had been an issue, and that's why the chase drain was recommended. So anyway, moving forward to today. And I want to just say too, we have one particular resident that has made allegations that, our staff are corrupt, which is unbelievable. But and maybe, I don't know if somebody can address, but we are in compliance with code with other municipalities, correct?
So I can speak to that. I did some research on neighboring jurisdictions and the codes and criteria that they have in place. Majority of the adjacent municipalities have detached sidewalks for their local streets, and they also have similar details for sidewalk chase drains and that kind of thing. So yes, we're comparable to other municipalities and jurisdictions in terms of codes and criteria.
Good. I wanted to just make that clear. So let me talk about the proposal that I have to move forward to the spring workshop. And, you know, we continue to, like I said, to have complaints. So one of the ideas is to do a rebate program, and this would be it would be a first come, first serve program. It would be citywide. It would not just be for Ward 6 for Southeast Aurora. And so they would have to apply for the rebate, but then it would have to be, once they apply, we would have an inspection to make sure that indeed a chase drain would work to solve the problem. Because some of the cases, chase drains weren't really a major factor in mitigating it. As mentioned, some of it is more the sump pumps and that type of thing. And even with the sump pump, sometimes the chase drain works, but sometimes it doesn't. So we would still have a requirement of an inspection to just ensure that that would substantially improve the situation. And then the rebate would only be for the cost of materials, not for labor. And they would have to still hire a licensed contractor to do the work and make sure that they're bonded. So pretty much, I think, you know, 600,000 was mentioned years ago. It was not approved. And I understand why it wasn't approved by my colleagues, because we were going to end up in a situation where we were just going to have more and more and more requests. And obviously that would be a huge impact on our budget. So I'm looking at probably a $300,000 ask. And once that money's gone, it's gone. So like I said, it would be a first come, first base kind of program, citywide applications to the department. And then, you know, there would be the inspection to make sure it qualifies. And then they would have to provide the receipts for the materials as well to prove that the work was done for reimbursement. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, thank you for that update, Councilmember Bergen. I'm sorry, Haley, did you have something to add?
No, I can't figure out how to mute, and I was coughing.
Oh, you're okay. I just saw the blue pop up around you. So I'm intrigued by the rebate program idea. So I understand we'll be discussing that at our next workshop. I want some background on how we got here, though, because what I heard was that these folks built to code, correct?
Well, the developers built a code.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so the developers built to code. I want to know how they're having ice buildups and these issues, and because I know that it seems to be coming from one specific community, at least in Southeast Aurora, right? I understand that
there's three. There's South Shore, Blackstone, Inspiration. There's actually a number of neighborhoods in the area. Partly, okay. I think because of the topography, and we're at 6,100 feet elevation. So when it does snow, you know, we get more snow, and then, you know, then it freezes as well. So a little bit more issues.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious to know more about the grading and the inspection process, like the grading for these properties, and what inspections were done after they completed the, you know, site work for these homes. Because if our code is, you know, in harmony with what other folks are doing around us, maybe they're not having the same level of issues. I understand that these matters will pop up from time to time, even in older communities as the ground shifts, you know, and as the infrastructure wears out. But I'm curious if this is like a construction defect effectively on the part of the developer, when they went out and went and built this area.
So there are definitely inspections by city and engineers. Councilmember Gardner and I, about, I don't know, maybe almost 2 months ago, had a meeting actually with the HBA. They convened a meeting, virtual meeting with a lot of developers, because we were like, you know, is there something that's not being done correctly? Do they have more ideas that we're not even thinking about? And it was very, very complex in terms of, but and we talked about the water table as well, because I was like, is it just this area has, you know, high water table and so forth? They say they do, and I can't remember, I don't have my notes in front of me, but I think like 3 different times throughout their construction, they'll, you know, drill down to look at the water table. So they do it periodically just to make sure. And they say typically the water table is fine. But they did say that once homes are built, you know, you get people watering their lawns. Some people are watering more than they're supposed to. You got the sump pump issue. So
Yeah.
they're, you know, it's just really difficult. But we got the gist of the meeting was, you know, from city perspective and from the developer perspective, was they're doing everything they can to mitigate it. If there's an issue that they feel that they were at fault, they assured us that they would, you know, that they would fix the problem with the homeowner.
Okay. And I guess who makes the determination if they're at fault or that they feel that they're at fault?
I don't know if staff has the answer to that, if there's a reinspection at all.
Harry, can you talk about the inspection process just a little bit?
Sure. My name is Terry Von Clausberg, City of Aurora Public Works Department, Public Improvement Inspections. We provide a lot of the infrastructure inspection. We also provide certificate of occupancy inspections for the exterior of the home. We look at plot plans, approved plot plans that match up to the area grading plan. We make sure those are in general compliance with the plot plan at the time of the CO request from the builder. That means the grading's correct, the swales are correct, everything's going, the drainage is going the direction it's shown on the area grading plan as well as the plot plan. Most of these problems are related to sump discharge. In other words, water around the foundation. And by design, by an engineer's design, there is a system around the foundation at the bottom of the basement. There's piping around the foundation. It goes around to a sump pit, is collected, and then a pump will discharge that water up to the side of the home, you know, normally. And it either goes to the front or the back, depending on the drainage. Most of these homes have the drainage going from the back of the home to the front. I mean, most normal drainage does not cause these problems. It's usually the sump discharge that overwhelms the system and puts much more water across the walk than just a normal rain event or snow melt event. Overnight, that water freezes. The cycle continues. It's normally pretty bad in January and February. Those are typically the 2 worst months for ice buildup. I would say everything that we do is generally compliant. The walk is at its 2% cross slope. The tree lawn, again, carries that 2% out to the road. As was mentioned earlier, the tree lawns, if they're sodded, almost inevitably are an inch or 2 high at installation of the sod by the home builder. And then with freeze-thaw processes, it starts to raise up another inch or so, which does create quite the damming effect, and the water is not able to get out into the tree lawn. Unfortunately, most of it goes across folks' driveway, across their sidewalk, and the problem and most of these problems, ironically, are the north-facing homes. It just happens to be that they're all north-facing, all with water problems. It's kind of weird how that works out that way, but I would attribute most of this to perched water tables, and people do put a lot of money in drilling and looking for not only the bedrock, but materials they are going to encounter during the home building process, and do monitor for water. I think I've mentioned to Council Member Bergen, the one that we had a problem with recently. The water table just wasn't that high at the time of their investigation. And, a year or two later, when they start building homes, it creeps up in these homes around these foundations. And it's I don't know that there's a rhyme or reason to it. I've seen hilltops have a lot of water and the bottom of the hill has no water, and vice versa. But I would think that we do our very best to make sure these are all compliant to the city code and the approved civil plans. And it's the most unusual situation I think I've encountered in a while. It happened. It seems to have happened in the last. I think this probably started in 2018 primarily, is when I started to see a lot of the complaints. Before that, maybe Talon's Reach may have had a few heavy water problems, but it seems like the Rocking Horse area, Talon's Reach, Blackstone, South Shore are seeing a lot of it.
Oh, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
The tree lawns being a major issue. So we are trying to obviously get builders to just not do turf, and which we're not, moving forward. We passed the ordinance that no turf in front yards, but the tree lawn as well. We're hoping that those will be water wise. But the conversion, and I know Terry, you've said that if they can do the water wise, and it's a combination of the rocks and other materials to try to get that water to flow onto the curb and gutter, that is helpful as well. So, not everyone will want, I guess, the chase drain. I think some of them will go towards the water-wise rebate program and try to do it that way as well. But, all of these, they're very expensive. Like we mentioned, $5,000 for the chase drain to convert your lawn. Even with the rebate, it's still considerable cost to a homeowner. So it's just been very frustrating for them to feel like, they saved their whole life savings to buy their house and made this huge investment, and then they end up with another problem. So
Yeah, I definitely understand that. My wife and I did a similar thing, and then we had $26,000 worth of water issues and plumbing issues in our townhome about a week after we bought it, but that's a whole nother story. So I guess a follow up on the chase drains here. Can we talk a little bit about the corrosion of them? Because I see one of the pictures here that you included in this presentation shows one that's pretty ugly and also like fairly rusted. So what does the maintenance on that look like, and who's responsible for that? Would that fall on the city?
Yeah, if they're designed to the city standard and within the public right of way, then that would be Aurora maintenance.
Okay, that's what I thought. How often will those need to be replaced? Or I guess what can we do to make them last a little longer? Because I'm concerned with salt, the temperature shifts that we have here, and the inclement weather. How does that impact the longevity of those covers?
Well, they could Haley, they could be galvanized.
Mm-hmm.
But that galvanization process adds to the cost of the chase. Probably to galvanize that plate, you could be looking at almost another $1,000 to have that plate galvanized. That would probably make it last forever, almost in our lifetime anyway. But it does add a little bit of cost to the final product. That's a 1/2 inch thick diamond plating. It likely will not fail anytime soon, but to your point, it over time, there could be a maintenance item there.
Okay. Oh yeah, go ahead, Councilmember.
Well, based on that, is there any way to put a warranty, if the homeowner chooses to use the rebate program, is there any way to put a warranty of it's, you know, I don't know, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. Does that make any sense?
Well, our current warranty is for a year.
Okay.
That's in code and in our spec book. I mean, that is something we could look at for sure, you know, another option, but I think that would be a change to our current standard and our current code to extend that.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know what it was. I didn't even know.
I think it's currently a year.
Okay. Well, then that's probably fine. Yeah.
And you know, it might be worth, if I could, sorry, if
No,
I could
absolutely.
just jump in. It might be worth us taking a closer look at that galvanizing, because if it does extend the life for 5 to 10 years, that might be worth that cost, right? If you spread it out over time.
Well,
So
Terry said forever.
forever then. I mean, if you're okay with that, maybe we could do a little more digging into that. And see also, like, I know Douglas County has been in a similar situation with Chase drain requests. And so we could also kind of see what kind of life they're getting out and whether or not they have galvanized or not, and maybe kind of talk through that with them. Just a thought.
I think that's a great idea. If this is something that council decides to do, I want to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck, you know. So I do want to go back to one of the questions or points that was brought up about maybe over irrigation happening and contributing to this. I understand, frankly, I'm really surprised that there's that many sumps in this area. Like, that's something that, you know, I'm familiar with, you know, doing in a lot of commercial architecture and projects that I worked on down on the Gulf Coast and in some other parts of the country, but up here, really? So can we talk a little bit about that? Like, is that,
Terry, how many sump pumps are there in Southeast?
Well, I mean, purely, I mean, keep in mind the home to a drainage, an under-drain system around the home with a sump in the basement is relatively cheap insurance on the home builder's part. It's done at the foundation stage. I mean, you're probably maybe $500 worth of labor and material to install a perimeter drain around the foundation and drop a sump pit in a basement and put a pump in it. It's really inexpensive to do that at time of a home being constructed. And I will tell you, as another, when home builders have investigated and found large quantities of water within their subdivision, those are mitigated with a complete underdrain system in a neighborhood. So developers do, when they see a problem, they do design for a complete underdrain system which is gravity fed and is all the homes are hooked up to it. The conservatory is a great example of a subdivision where they had a large water problem and mitigated it with an underdrain system. But those are expensive to do for an entire neighborhood. But that's, you know, if developers do find water problems, they mitigated those ways as well.
Yeah. I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead, Councilmember.
Yeah, Terry, I think we had talked also about years ago when we had less complaints. Did the city have the tree lawn requirement?
Yeah, the tree lawn's been in place since 2000. Okay.
Was there any other change? I can't remember.
Not to my knowledge, no, not on the local road construction. That cross section's been that way since the 2000, when we changed the spec book in 2000.
Okay.
So I understand that there's cost, you know, for the, you know, community-wide under drain, I guess, system. I keep coming back to, it seems like the developer here might have done what was beneficial for them. As you said, this is like, you know, good insurance on their part, but now it's coming back and it's going to cost the public potentially, you know, or all of our residents to deal with these issues in specific areas. And I want to be clear, I want to help folks out. So if this is something that, you know, we have to, I guess, foot the bill for, we'll have that discussion coming up, but I feel like the developer ought to also pay into this, since this seems to me like it was a design consideration that was done in the past that now the homeowners are having to deal with. And I understand that y'all had a meeting, you and Councilmember Gardner had a meeting with them, Councilmember Bergen. but they're going to be playing CYA on their end in those conversations as well. So I'd like to explore what options we have to maybe get some cost sharing here, because I don't think it's right that they took measures that seemed more geared towards protecting themselves, and then frankly kind of set a little ticking time bomb for folks. And now the homeowners are having to figure out what to do because this is impacting their quality of life and their safety in their streets. So
I will say that the home, you said the cost, but the homeowner on the proposal that I would bring forward on the rebate would bear the cost of the labor, and we would not pay for all the materials. We would pay a percentage of that. So it's not like the taxpayers are going to share the burden of the entire cost. The majority of the cost still would go on that homeowner that applies for the program. But then also back to the developer discussion, not everyone needs a chase drain. And so, it's been, and Terry, you can speak to this, it's hit and miss. I mean, it is mostly north facing homes, but it's not always, and it's not even, you could have one next door to each other and one's fine and the other one isn't. So, we are, I did sponsor the resolution that there's a 1-year warranty for any new development. But even in that situation, not everyone is going to have an issue. So it's kind of hard to say, well, okay, let's make every developer put in, I don't know, under drainage systems or chase drains in every single home when that's not necessary, and may present a problem for maintenance.
Yeah. And I just want to be clear, I'm not saying let's add this to every home. I'm just saying in this specifically with the 3 communities that you mentioned, because I've seen the complaints as well. Sometimes they copy all of us on them, but I'm sure you see way more than we do. This really does seem to me like a concentrated issue with some developers. So I understand that we're not going to cover the full cost, and that's fine. But I feel like the developers definitely have some skin in this game. Since it seems concentrated in these specific communities. I think there's a difference between, a property that's 30 plus years old or even older, maybe the ground is heaved and, the drainage doesn't work. So we have to come up with some kind of engineering solution to it. But these communities are much newer than some of the other spaces in Aurora where we have potentially, the potential to have chase drains installed. So I'm a lot less sympathetic to the developers of these communities, and I feel like the residents are kind of getting the short end of the stick here. And like I said, I'm not against, doing what we can to help folks out. I just want to make sure that they're paying their share as well.
Yeah.
Developers specifically are paying their share as well.
Well, they weren't real thrilled with the 1-year warranty on chase drains when they feel like they're not even necessary for, all situations. So.
No, I get it. But again, it comes down to, I think, poor engineering and a lack of foresight on the folks who worked on these properties over here. This isn't something that's common throughout the state. So
you might want to schedule some meetings with the developers, and they can have their engineers talk about their standards and what they do to mitigate things before they build homes, because it's not so easy as saying that they're being negligent.
I get that there's a lot of factors that go into this. I worked in the industry, but you kind of, take that into account.
Were you an engineer?
No, I was an architectural designer and a BIM manager, but yeah, I did work with a lot of engineers, and I'm familiar with how that process works on their end as well. And what we're doing right now is we're engineering solutions to issues that were created by a lack of proper foresight. So, I'm just really upset about that, and I'm upset for the residents that are having to deal with this. But that's we'll probably talk more about that during the workshop.
Probably so. And, lack of foresight, if you look at streets, and I'm very familiar with most of these situations, again, it's not, like the entire street of homes has the issue. So, it's like, how would a developer know which home is going to have that issue ahead of time?
Yeah, that's why I guess I wanted to go back to the grading and the inspections and all that, but I got you.
Yeah, and the inspection, I think, will bear out as well if there was a homeowner neglect, and that has happened a few times where we have found that the homeowner has changed the grading of their backyards or their side yards themselves, and that has actually cause problems for the next neighbor, for example. And so we've had issues with neighbors against neighbors because somebody changed their grading and then they go back to code enforcement and want it solved. So it's complicated.
Oh, for sure. And, those, I would hope anyway, that those situations are a little easier to remedy. But I'm more concerned for the folks who, through no fault of their own, are now having this happen, basically. So, but yeah, all right. Are there any other questions or comments from Councilor Medina or Bergen?
No.
I'm good.
All right. Well, thank you all for the presentation. This was for information only. So,
Thank you for the time.
yes, ma'am. Thank you for joining us. All right. So, moving on to item 5, miscellaneous matters for consideration. I do not have any at this point. Well, I guess I had one earlier that we'll incorporate about the full process for from conceptualization to construction, basically for our public improvements. So hopefully we can get that scheduled for an upcoming meeting. Councilor Medina, did you have anything that you wanted to add to the calendar?
Well, I guess since we're talking about these drains, since I kind of live in a neighborhood too where we had some issues with that too, and older subdivision, obviously. But I'm in a cul-de-sac which angles down to a dip, and that corner house basically the ice doesn't flow down because it goes to the next block over where the drain is. So it piles up there, and then to the same point, it freezes and it creates 5-6 inches of ice that you can hack at it, but you're going to need a bar and some heavy tools to be able to hack that. And so that creates a lot of ruts and it also creates a bottom out because it accumulates so high that cars bang their underside. So I don't know what can be done about those particular things because they're obviously older structures, but I'd like to see if there's opportunities there because I've seen them in my neighborhood in a couple different places where the drain, for whatever reason, the slope isn't right. And I mean, there's a house on a slope. He's like in the middle of the block, but just his residence gets all the ice, and it just goes over the sidewalk for probably 6-7 feet, and it's specific to his house. No other house on either side gets that accumulation, but I think it's just the way the angle of the road goes that it creates like a little buffer there, a dam, and he kind of gets that concentration. So I'm just curious about if there's any solutions for that.
Yeah, a couple things. If you could get us those addresses, Councilmember Medina, we can get out and take a look at those. We also have the ice cutting program, and we'll include that in the meeting minutes so that you know the contact information. But if it is actually a concrete issue, we can also get our concrete folks out there to take a look at it and see if there's any improvements by adjusting or replacing some of the concrete stones that might help mitigate that issue. But
Thank you.
so if you can send that, that'd be great.
I can. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Medina. So moving on to item 6, anticipated topics for the next meeting. So what do we got on deck for next month?
I'm gonna see if Matt is on. If he has an update.
I'm pulling that up right now.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Matt.
So for March, we have the 20 is plenty. Follow up.
April.
And we also have the DEN update with the outside speaker from Rachel Gruber. We had originally targeted that for this month, but we slid this meeting a week because of spring break, and she wasn't able to make the reschedule.
Hey, Matt.
So,
Matt,
yes.
I had a quick question. Do you mean April's meeting?
Yeah.
For the 20
Yes.
is plenty? Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
And then I also anticipate the new item that Councilmember Marcano just brought up, which would be the presentation that walks us through the grant. project process and CDOT oversight, local agency process.
Great. And could we also include our independent process, if that makes sense, for what it looks like for us?
Yes, yep. That's kind of what I was thinking as well, is we'll kind of just compare and contrast. These are the extra things.
Yes. And then I also want to look at our side of it, what we can control directly, and see if there's opportunities to maybe streamline some things. But great, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
And I actually wanted to follow up on the 20 is Plenty in the Den presentation, because I thought we were supposed to have them this month. So thank you for that, Matt. All right.
We hired a consultant to help us out with that as well. So that's why we needed a little bit more time for the 20 is Plenty. So.
And one note on Den, they actually have some schedule conflicts until this summer. So they'll be joining us in like the June or July meeting.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you all for that update. So let's confirm our April meeting. I'm looking at the 27th at 1 p.m. Does that work for you, Councilor Medina?
Yes.
All right, that also works for me. And I'm assuming staff is good with that as well. All right, fantastic. So I will see you all again on the 27th at 1 p.m. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.